Hello, welcome to the April 17th, 2026 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And when asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with the number of questions coming in. So as questions are asked, we'll go through the chat chronologically in order to get through all the questions. If you don't see an immediate response to your particular question, just realize that we will get to it. And if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're using, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs. Also, if you could indicate which version number, so if it's 13, Cubase 14, 15, or other Steinberg programs, and which operating system. So if you're running on Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so that you could navigate quickly to your particular questions. And if you wanted to search for questions been asked, we have over 44,000 different questions. If you wanted to search for other topics that have been asked, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We're going to also give a shout out to two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their help. So it's going to be for Jazz Dude and Agent K. We also want to give a round of applause for Jazz Dude for his wonderful work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord site. So it's a wonderful resource of information that's beneficial to the Steinberg community, different links, presets, which are all, it's a great resource to be able to find those and tutorials. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm going to be the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself, or even if you're watching it afterwards, and just let us know exactly where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world joining in the community today. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Laga for you asks, hi Greg, is there a trick to hide the audio or MIDI tracks assigned to the group channel track, like hiding the tracks in the folder? So if you want to, let's say if we have a folder track here, so let's say right now I have a folder track with all of my drums and a bass track here within this folder with group tracks. So if I want to come over here, I could collapse the folder directly here. If we want to do this from within the mix console, so once we have a folder with group track, just on the folder with group track, what we could do is we'll see this little icon here of a folder, and then we could just kind of tuck away those particular tracks right there. So when we see this, now if we have a particular track that we want to hide, we can just come over here you'll see track agent visibilities. So one of the ones we could do is to just say hide selected tracks. So if I want to hide my snare track, my snare 08, I could say let's hide the selected tracks. That track is now hidden from both the mixer and the project window. Conversely, if we show all tracks, we could also click on the visibility here, and we could choose to hide tracks just when we enable the visibility tab at the top here, and that will be going for, so if I wanted to hide the entire folder, we could do that. If I wanted to just come over here, let's hide my input channels. Let's say now I want to see all of my drums. I could now just click right there to show all of those. All right, next question from Laga for you. How to use the external effects of a Digitech GSP Studio 2 processor connected to Cubase Pro 15 with USB MIDI interface on the tracks that I have in my project. So I believe that unit has the MIDI just probably for doing editing and primarily for changing patches or presets with MIDI program changes. But I don't believe, and I haven't looked at that interface in a while, or that guitar processor, that it did any audio capabilities. So what you're going to need to do is to configure it as like an external effect. So when we come over, we would go to your studio menu to audio connections. Now we're going to have a particular audio interface. If you want it to just record through that particular device, you could just, plug your guitar or instrument into that device, take the output of that device, and connect it directly to the audio input of your sound card or audio interface. So the input of your audio interface, and then you could capture the sound of that. Now, if you wanted specifically to kind of treat it like a plugin, we would need to go again to your studio menu to audio connections, and we could go to external effects. So we could come over here, let's add an external effect. So this, we would need an available input and output from your audio interface. If you wanted it to be just a mono track, you could do that, but probably if you're dealing with effects like reverbs and delays and flanging chorusing, we would want that to be stereo. So we could say, okay, we're going to have an external effect. We'll give it a name. So we'll say our Digitech GSP, I think is the model. All right, so we're going to say we want a stereo in and stereo out. We're going to hit OK. So let's come over here. We'll see now our Digitech unit. What you need to do is to go into your particular audio interface, tell it where it's connected. So you're going to need like 2 additional inputs and outputs. So once you have the ins and outs configured, what you could do now is when we go to a particular audio track, so let's say, okay, I want to come here. Let's go to this audio track and we go to the inserts. What we would see as we come here under external plugins, we would say, okay, here's your Digitech GSP Studio. And this is one of the important things is by the time the audio goes out from your audio interface into the, so once it's going out of the audio interface, it's going to be sent to the Digitech GSP Studio. It gets processed there. The outputs, so we go into the inputs of the Digitech unit. It gets processed. The outputs of the Digitech unit are connected to the inputs of your audio interface. Now, by the time it goes through that path, there may be timing problems and may be out of time because you're dealing with the converters of that particular interface and coupled with the latency of your audio interface. So once you go to instantiate, you'll get this little window here. And what you want to do is to measure the delay. So we come right over here and we measure the delay. And that will ping the system and automatically figure out how long that signal path is and will compensate for your external processing gear. So if you don't have the available inputs or outputs, all you would need to do is just take your guitar in and then record it as audio. If you have available inputs and outputs, you could then run it as an external effect. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, we see Jazz Dude on. We have Tim Weinheimer, who's on from Mission Viejo. We have Stefan Larsson from Sweden. We have Klaas checking in from Malmo, Sweden. Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Stella, and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. All right. All right, just see a quick comment from Popcorn. Let me just see if it's any questions, or maybe just a greeting. I'll just send it into my Google Translate. All right, it's not translating well on my end. All right, we'll move on. Jazz Dude apparently understands. All right, we have VS Terranova joining from Amsterdam. All right, we have Jason Sykes. Great to see you on from South Yorkshire, England. All right, so Baba Saw says, hi Greg, using Cubase 15 Pro on Mac Sequoia, is there any built-in resources I can use to generate microtonal notes? Ideally, I'd love to alter the pitch of my Contact instruments. So I'm not a big user of Contact, but you can do it as in part of the VST3 specification. So let's say if I want to come over here and let's go to like a Rhodes patch. Yeah, let me just turn that down to kill. Sorry about that. Just see if I get my gain structure a little bit. All right, so when I come over here, one of the things that we could do, so part of the VST3 came in VST 3.5 was the ability of microtonality. So if we come over, you could go to, now not all instruments support that. So there's a lot of features of VST, like really super beneficial, great things of VST that Contact doesn't support, just they've chosen not to. But one of them is you could say, okay, I want to go to my micro tuner. So I could say, okay, I want to be in the key of C. And I could now just come over here and say, okay, I want this to be a pure major. So as I play, we could just come over here. So let's say I'm playing along and I want to take my E natural here. And let's say I just want to adjust my E natural. So if I come here, so you could come over here and have pure major or pure minor. So if you want to, so let's say, okay, I want this G to be sharp. So you could do that. Howlingen supports it. Retrolog supports Pad Shop. So the Steinberg range of synthesizers will allow you to do different microtonality. So if you wanted to be able to do this, and even if you have our Dorico software, you can, choose to have 24 EDO, equal divisions of the octave. So if you wanted to have quarter tone and half tones, so you could do that, but I'm not sure if Contact actually supports that or not. All right. We see just, he says we want to experiment with tunings like EDO 31, etc. If there's a way to do this with Retrolog. I can show you how to do it. So we could do kind of within a 12-tone scale. I'll show you just in Dorico if you wanted to experiment with it. see piece I was working on Dorico here, but I think if we go to so here within Dorico, you could also just do 24 EDO, but I don't know of anything that does 31. You might be able to see if we adjust that. It's a piece I'm working on Dorico for my upcoming orchestra concert. So I don't know 31, but play around with the micro tuner that's inside of Cubase to start with. And then, but if you wanted to, I think you could. This might even be in Dorico SE, which is a free download. But here you could have different kind of 24 EDO directly within Dorico. So that's Gershwin Piano Concerto. All right, so we see DJ Stats just seeing a lot of comments. People have moved over to Cubase. So lots of people are always moving to Cubase, kind of graduating to Cubase often. All right, Tim Weinheimer says, can you show a little about the automation panel and what it can do and a little bit about the settings? Thank you. So certainly. All right. So we'll go ahead and just take a quick look. All right, so the automation panel could be accessed in 3 different areas. So we could say, okay, I want to come over where we see kind of our automation panel that we could adjust. Let's see if I can get my mouse to cooperate. Okay, so if you go to the project menu, you can go directly to the automation panel here. All right, or a new way to access it is from the right zone. So here what we could do is say, okay, we want to, globally read and write automation. We could also suspend reading and writing of all automation. We're going to have different automation modes here. So we're going to have touch, which would write the automation as soon as a particular parameter is touched. So let's say if I'm going here to this particular track, so let's go ahead and open up its automation. We'll make this track larger with its automation. Okay, so now if I'm automating a particular track here, and we're in touch mode, we can now just come over, and as soon as I touch the automation, it automatically writes the automation, and then as I let go, it will stop writing that particular automation data. Now there's a couple of settings here, so one of them that you may have noticed is to use virgin territory. So I'm not going to have any automation data written before or after, just exactly where we wrote that. Now we could also say, okay, I want to write automation in auto latch. So as soon as I'm here, I move the fader, it's going to write. Let me just take it out of here so you can see it. So now I'm in auto latch. When I go to write the automation, it will keep that value. I'm going to let go of the fader, and it'll keep that value until I hit stop. So that way I don't have to keep touching the fader. I could let go, and then when I stop the transport, that's when it will write the end node. Now we could also have crossover. So let's say if I'm here and I just want to do a quick volume dip, I could move it down, and then as soon as I move it up, it will automatically, when it gets to the threshold where it was at, it will automatically stop writing as soon as it crosses over the existing automation point. So, and then we're going to have trim. So let's say I have this automation is all overall too soft in this particular area, with trim, I could just increase my automation here. And then as soon as I come over here, we could now see our existing automation with our new automation curve. And when we go to trim here, we could just say, okay, when we go to our settings, we could say freeze to trim, let's say manually. So, or we could say on pass end. So now when I come over here, let's say if I wanted to adjust the trim automation, I could adjust my trim automation. And then as soon as I stop, we could see that the automation will be increased or decreased based on how much, if I just wanted to kind of proportionally move the existing automation up or down. All right, now we also could come over and we're going to have fill modes. So let's say if I have a punch in coming here, so let me move my left and right locators. You could say, okay, I'm going to move my fader. So let's say I move it here, and I'm going to just put it in touch mode here. Okay. So now I write my automation, and it will automatically, if we have punch in and punch out, let me just turn those on. So let me just do a small range here. So come over here to my transport, and we'll just set our punch points. So now if we have like fill to punch from here, so we're good, right? My automation here. So I can say, okay, I'm finding my spot. And then we could just fill into punch. Now we could also have fill to start. So let's say if I'm doing a bunch of tracks and I just haven't gotten to track 30 yet to get my quick levels, I could just come over here and say, okay, this is the level. Now when I stop, it'll write the automation node at the beginning of the event. We could also say fill to end. If I wanted to fill kind of like everything within the loop, I could come over here, let's select the loop. So if I'm looking for the volume level, say, oh, okay, this is, and say, okay, this is where I want to be for the loop. Now that I stop, it will automatically, wherever I stopped, use that automation value there. We could also fill in the gaps, and that's if we're using the virgin territory where it won't write automation data before or after the automation. Now any of these, if I wanted them to permanently be on, I would just double click and that would place a lock, and then that lock would kind of stick for that particular automation. You could also suspend reading and writing of different parameters. So if we want to, if I want to be able to suspend, I want to be able to adjust my EQ without writing all of my adjustments while I'm searching for the frequencies, but I want to automate my volume and pan, but not me searching for EQ or dynamics. So we could filter out different types of automation data for reading and writing. We also will have whether we want to show our volume pan EQ or show used automation or hide all automation. And some other cool things in the settings is you could say, okay, the last touched parameter. So let's say if I'm on a track here and I'm in my channel strip. So let's say I'm over here, let's move this, and let's say I'm in my compressor and I go to my standard compressor and I want to adjust my threshold. So we could say, okay, we want to show on next automation track or show at top. So since this was the last parameter that I touched, the threshold on a channel strip compressor, when I go to open up the automation lanes, that threshold is automatically going to show up at top. And we could see kind of our recently automated parameters directly there. If we have automation on a track that has audio, and our parameter that's often helpful is to show data on tracks. So we could now just come over here if I wanted to see the waveform when I'm editing automation data or not. So those are a couple of things that you could do. So you could have, automation reduction, so you're not writing 14,000 unnecessary points to go from one volume to another point. So you could have your automation data reduction there. So that's a couple of things, and now it's also handy to be able to access all of these particular functions from the right-hand zone. So they're originally thinking of making that just a Windows specific feature, and then we all kind of championed it's like, oh, it'd be great to have in Cubase as well. So you can now access all these the automation panel from the right zone. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Tim. All right, so we see Soren on. We see Vince from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. All right, Uno Momento joining from Finland. Great to see you on. We have Braxel on. All right, so we see Sharky 3840. Hi, I'm trying to transition from FL Studio to Cubase, but having a hard time finding where stuff is. Where should I start? Having a hard time with manual MIDI editing. So, if you have any particular, types of editing tasks, so let's say if I just want to come over here, we could double click on our event. We could make this a full screen editor. Let me know if there's any particular things. So obviously this is a piano roll editor. We're going to have, we could right click and access tools. So if we wanted to draw a note, if we wanted to select notes, we could use the arrow keys to move notes. Chromatically here, if I hold down the shift key, we could move it down by octaves. If I want to erase a note, I could either double click on the note, or we could just grab the eraser tool if we wanted to, again, just draw notes in. We could do that. We could go to the bottom, and if we could see our velocity for notes here. So if we want, we could just have that automatically, we can see the color of the notes change via the velocity. If we wanted the same velocity for a number of different notes, or if I wanted to raise or lower the velocity, I could select these, and let's go to our velocity value. So if I wanted to proportionally move these down like by 20, I could just type in 60, and those notes would be, those velocity values would change. If I want these all to be the same velocity, I could select all of my notes here, go to the velocity value, say, okay, make it 100, hold down Control or Command, and now all of those notes that were selected will have the same velocity curve. And to be able to move notes, we could come right over here, hold down the Alt or Option key, and not the Command key like I just did, my Alt or Option key. And when I go to move notes, if I moved it vertically first and then I hold down Control or Command, it will lock it into place so I can't move it in time. Or if I have notes that I want to be locked into their pitch, what I could do is select the particular notes here, and if I move it horizontally first, so let's say I move it here, now I hold down Control or Command, I cannot move or change the pitch. I released Control or Command, I can move it to any pitch, any location, but now just holding down Control or Command, depending on what direction I moved it in, will kind of constrain the direction of edits. But if you have more questions, anything specific, we're here to help you transition. And we want to welcome you to the Steinberg community. And we hope to see you on many more live streams in the future. All right, so we have Razel's Mini joining from Denmark. Great to see you on. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says it was a Switzerland German dialect saying hello to all. So thank you for the wish, and thanks for, didn't show up in my Google Translate, so thank you for translating for us, Jazz Dude. I figured it was something like that. All right, you see Matt Elston on. We have Brian Sawyer as Brian the Bear from Yuma, Arizona. Great to see you on. All right. So we see from Soren says, Greg, I ran VST Connect on my laptop yesterday. I got sync errors on the server side. On my side, we're using wired internet. Can you say something that was the cause? Usually like wired internet will cut off a lot of the variables that will be, because what happens a lot of times if the internet speed is speeding up and slowing down, or it's fluctuating, which is often what you get on Wi-Fi, you could get kind of different error messages, but I haven't really come across that. Be interesting to see if you have any like virus scanning or any kind of like virus software on your laptop that might be causing issues. And let me know if you tried it, if you have a desktop and a laptop, if you are able to successfully record internally because you had a VST Connect Pro. So let me know if you do that, if you still get the messages or only when you're working with that particular client that you're recording. See, Jazz Dude says, oh my God, cat music drives me crazy. No microtonality for him. So sometimes I think it could be really beautiful if you have everything like set to like a pure temperament. I think it could be really pleasant sounding as things are more in tune. I know some artists that are very particular. One who's like super well-known recording artist who probably everyone admires their work, who doesn't like MIDI because he's not a equal temperament type of person. He's very much a pure temperament, and when you listen to his music, right, is that his piano is actually, and his Rhodes is tuned to a pure temperament for particular keys, so that the keys all sound more in tune to him. So. Okay, so we see from Vince's Fly-V, when I start up and I have an old keyboard that appears on a missing port. How do I get rid of this? So one is just come over here and see if it's showing up under the MIDI port setup. And you could make sure you could come over here and see if it's not visible. If you get a message like to change the particular port, like, it's like a missing MIDI port message, and it's set up to, like, let's say it's an old controller and then you have a new controller and you're like, okay, I want to use the new controller instead, that you could remap it and save that song, because it's probably, if you go to like the MIDI input port of a particular channel here, so let's say, okay, we come over to this and we look at the input port, that maybe your particular device or a track is, there's probably some device here that has a reference to that particular MIDI port. So maybe if you find where that device is, and you might be able to see it clearly in the mixer. So let's say if you go to the full screen mixer and go to the routing tab. So let's say, okay, if this is set to my my CC121 port, you may notice that this particular input port is missing, or the output port is missing. And I would just maybe choose for this to, choose not connected, or choose the input if it's an input to all MIDI inputs instead. But it's probably something in that project is defined to follow that particular, to look for MIDI data from that particular input port. So if you have that kind of configured, check to make sure you don't have any tracks that have that, and that's probably what's triggering the message saying, we're looking for this MIDI port that's connected to this particular track. And we don't see that device. Do you want to assign a different MIDI input port for that track? All right, so we see Benny checking in. All right, you see John Kostigan joining us from Wisconsin. Dalbsky asks, hi Greg, how to make a polyrhythm track? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get to like some drums. Okay, so let's say I just want to start off with maybe like a drum machine part here. So I don't think I have anything. I'll just look at our drum machine. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do now is to come over and we'll go to this editor. Okay, so let's say I want to do a polyrhythmic drum part, for instance. All right, so the pattern editor is really good for this. So let's say, okay, I want to come over. All right. All right, so let me just click on this so we hear it. Sorry, my mouse is. Okay, so let's say we want to do like a typical just all right, let me adjust my control room up a little bit here. Okay, so let's say, okay, now I want to do my snare. And what I could do here is say, okay, my snare, I want this to be in 14 steps. So we see that this pattern here is going to play 16 steps. And I can say I want my snare to play 14 steps. So while this is continuing to play 16, this is playing 14. So let's come over and say, okay, I want to do my closed hi-hat. And let's make this 17. And I want to throw in an open hi-hat or two. And let's say, okay, when I come over here to my bongos, I want this to be 10. And let's say for my clavs, I want this to be 7. So these are all playing kind of their own patterns. But now this is in 7/8, this is in 5/4, this is in 4/4, this is in 17/16. And let's come over here to the shaker. I want that to be in 4/4. And let's say for Beverly's sake, she always wants more cowbell. And let's make our cowbell into 9/8. So you can just adjust the number of steps here, and now you have a polyrhythmic part just that easily. So again, our snare, our kick is in. Let's say I want that to be 4 on the floor. Or we'll just go with our snare. Let's put our hand clap here. And now you could have a completely polyrhythmic part. And now if I wanted to add like a bass part on top of that, like I say, let's just add an instrument track. We'll come over to, let's say, a retro log. And let's make this a pattern event. All right, so now when I come over, we can say we're going to make this into a melodic event. All right, and let's say I want this to be from C1 to C3. So you could just say, okay, let's come here. Yeah, let's just switch the octave here. Let's come here. So you could now just kind of come over here. Let's have it just randomly generate pattern, bass note length. So you could just come over here and, just choose kind of like, different steps, and like for your drum part, and then you're able to easily do polyrhythms. So again, we'll just look at our particular drum machine. So you look at it, you can, again, just put different number of steps and come up with really interesting polyrhythms that you probably wouldn't do in a traditional, much harder to do in other traditional composition formats. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Daubsky. Jazz Dude shared a link on polymeter versus polyrhythms. All right, so we have a question. Is there any tools to write lyrics? So there isn't like if you're looking for kind of like an AI, it's like I'm looking for something that's 6 syllables that ends with the vowel sound E or something like that. There isn't anything like that. What a lot of people do is just utilize, let's see if I think I have an example of it I could pull up. See if it's in a recent list. So if you have a particular MIDI note, I'll just show it here. Let's just check again that I had it. Yeah, okay. Okay, so here, let's say if I go to my visibility tab, if I wanted to see the lyrics in with the particular song, one of the things that you could do is, I think I have just a marker track. Let me just see if it's in another project here. So I actually kind of put it as markers in my particular project. So let me see if I have this one that I'm thinking of. Let me see if so one of the things that I do, I'll show you this, is just kind of come over here and I will say, let's go to the project notepad. So within the project, I usually have kind of all of the lyrics laid out for me here. So let's say I'll show you what we could do with like a marker track. So let's say I want to copy that first line. So let's say, so I'm going to just add another marker track. So, and I'm just going to drop this marker, like let's say right here. And for the name of the marker, so let me just hit Control or Command M. And then in description, I'm just going to paste.
We played our records into the night.
And then I'm going to copy that line. Let's just drop our lyric in, our marker. Let's say right there. And so this way you could just navigate to.
We played our records into the night. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay. Guess all along.
All right, so now if I just again wanted to just kind of paste the lyrics over, let me just come here. So copy.
We played our records into the night. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
All right, so let's just drop our marker in here. So, you know, if you go through this way of doing the song,
Up until now, that was
okay. So if you have kind of the lyrics as text, you can copy it into the project notepad. And now what's helpful about this is how we can navigate. So let's say if I open up my, let's say if I open up within the inspector and we come here, one of the great things is I could just have my lyrics and they say, you know, because a vocalist rarely says, okay, let's go to measure 15, beat 3 and do a punch in. They just go by the line. So to go, yeah, I want to do that line that says up until now again. You can now just click right here and that would automatically take you directly to.
up until now, that was
And you say, oh, I turned it up. Go back to that line. I turned it up. And now you can just come right here.
turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So you could just kind of have your markers laid out for your lyrics right there. Now, if you wanted to add lyrics for like a tool, like a virtual vocalist, what you can do is just double click here, select the note, and you'll see text. And then you could type in the lyrics. If you're doing something with like OmniVocal, you could have, that's where you would enter in the words for like an AI singing tool to sound. So let me know if that's helpful for you. But nothing that would like automatically generate rhymes and like maintaining meter and number of syllables, stuff like that. All right, so we see, says, hi, great question. Both Nuendo and Cubase new folder with or without group functions changes the color of some events in one or more tracks, but I have the preferences set not to change. Okay, so check. All right, so let's say if I want to take a number of these tracks and I'm going to put them into a folder with a group. So we see that we have 4 different colors here. So we have these tracks. All right, these colors here are pretty similar, but let's go ahead. And I'm going to turn, now sometimes if you have tracks that have colors on them, those may automatically stick, but let's come over here. I'm just going to add the colors. Let's look at the preference first for the benefit of those who don't know about the preference. So if we come over here to event display into folders, we can say apply color of folder track automatically. So let's say if I choose never and I make a folder track with group, All right, so now we have all of the folders and their events automatically maintained as they were. Now let's say I want to change that settings to always apply the color. Okay, so now I select these 4 tracks and we move these to the new folder with group channel. We can see that now if I come over here, let's change the folder track color, that now they will all change together. So let's say if we undo that and let's do the last setting here. So with the group channel, so let's go ahead and move these to our folder. All right. And now as we change this, they will all change accordingly. Now, if one of the events was colorized separately, where the event was colorized, now when I come over here, that if we specifically kind of chose the hierarchy of coloring the event, then that event will stick and won't follow the track colors. So let me know if that's working differently for you as it is there, but it seems to kind of work as I would expect. So try setting that to never. All right, so we see from Sharky 3840, since FL doesn't have a proper glissando feature, I guess, how do slides work in Cubase? So a lot of times this could be based more on the particular, how the instrument does it, not necessarily like a key editor. I mean, you could draw in a portamento, and if the instrument doesn't really support it, then it's not going to be like a key editor type of situation. But let me come over. All right. All right, so let's say we have a sampler track here. All right, so I'm going to just grab like a note here. And I'm going to open up the sampler control, and we're going to just drag this over. Oh, I'm sorry, it's an inactive project. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say now, I'll normalize this. So let's say now we're going to have, we're playing our sampler track here. All right, so let's say if we want to come over here, so we could say, okay, let's go to our pitch. So we can say, okay, and once we activate our pitch, we will see, usually we'll see kind of our glide control. Yeah, so our glide. So now if I go, so let me just adjust this to say, so if we come over here, say I hit this note. So depending on the instrument, and you can see, and you could adjust it. If you want to be slower. if you kind of and you could adjust the speed of that. So really, often with glides, is going to be dependent upon the actual instrument and how that instrument responds to glides. Okay, so when Chatfield jumped. All right. So we see Soren says he recorded on his PC. This time the client recorded on my PC with his client before, and it works great. Something on a laptop, maybe it's antivirus. Laptop is a 13-year-old i7 with broken NVIDIA. So so check to make sure that they're actually. Sometimes people will have a wired connection but still have the Wi-Fi on. So make sure that their Wi-Fi on their computer is completely turned off and disabled, because sometimes they may say, oh, I plugged it in and it's still using the Wi-Fi connection and not the wired connection. So check that out. All right, wonderful to see John Barry on from the English Riviera. And we see Jazz Dude also mentioning just check out Latency Mon to see if it points out anything. It's a great idea. I should have suggested that. All right, so we see Rick from Bratman Studio on. Just wishing that everyone's going to have a great weekend. I'm going to play some disc golf with my son tomorrow morning. Looking forward to that. We see Randy Lee Music joining from Texas. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, so we see Wismo74. Hi, Greg. The question is, NI Complete Control as a DAW controller. The same goes for Elgato Stream Deck controller. Only the Nectar Panorama CS12 connects correctly. How present this? So let me know if you're running it as a MIDI remote, because if you're in a MIDI remote, you may have to... so let me know if you're configured in the MIDI remote for it already or not. So if you don't have the Elgato or the NI Complete, so some of the controllers, like if they're not using MIDI, so the Stream Deck often uses, I'm not sure if you're using MIDI or if you're using like just the key command. So if it's using the key commands, it's not going to show up in the MIDI remote because it's not transmitting MIDI data. And with your NI control, it could be set up. I think that they have MIDI remote now, but make sure that you don't have like a generic MIDI remote here. So if you have a generic remote, or if there's like a profile for your NI control when you go to your studio menu to studio setup, if it's kind of working as a generic remote, that would probably block it from showing up as a MIDI in the MIDI remote section. So, let me know if you're running MIDI for the Stream Deck, or if it's just key commands. If it's key commands, it's not going to show up here. But if you have, and also when you go to the studio setup, and you'll see kind of your remote control, see if you have a separate device here for like a generic remote. If you see just if you see a listing here for the native instruments controller, you probably want to set that to not connected and then import the MIDI remote script. So if you go to like the MIDI remote script, you can just come over here to the scripts and import this script directly from there. Okay, so we see from Parabot 2 in Australia, if memory serves me correct. How do you install third-party MIDI drum patterns and use them with Groove Agent? Cubase Pro 15, yes, upgraded. Thank you for your time and effort. So let me know if they're just MIDI files. What you would need to do is, because if it's not going to be tied particularly to an instrument, now there are third-party companies that just make, when we go to Media Bay, we go to loops and samples, a good number of the ones that we see here are, if we come over to, so, if we wanted to, let's say, like a third-party company will make, like Simon Phillips. So, so some of the MIDI files, so let's say if we come over and if you have MIDI files, so they may be showing up here. If it's just MIDI files, with like, kick, snare, and kind of standard, you would just need to come over here, go to your file browser, and go to where those particular MIDI loops are. And what you could do is, and if you wanted to be able to access that regularly, is you could right click here and just say add favorite. So we can say these are MIDI drum patterns. Okay, and now once you're here, you can say you go to the home, and then you say go to your favorites, and then you could just say, okay, I'm looking for my MIDI drum patterns, and you could see and navigate directly to that particular folder. So your third party, if it's kind of gone through like the official Steinberg vetting process, and we do that so that we can ensure that all the tagging is correct, then you would just see when you go to like your VST instruments and you go to Groove Agent, here you could just look for all of your particular patterns that you want. Now you could also do this directly from within Groove Agent as well. So if you're just here, you could say, okay, I'm just looking, so at this point, you could just say, okay, I want to look through my browser and say, okay, I'm going to this computer, and I could look and browse through all of my different MIDI files and just, drag and drop them and import the patterns directly inside of Groove Agent as well. All right, so we see from FlyV, how can I check and see if I got the recent Cubase update installed? I think I do. So if you just kind of go to like your About menu, I think, which may be under Help, and on Windows, I think you're on Windows, or if you go to the About screen, you can see right here the version number. So they just released a hotfix this week. So the current latest version is 15.0.21. So that's how you could see it. I think on the Windows platform, I think it's under the Help menu, and then you could see the About Cubase, and then you can see the version number in there. All right, so we see, hi, will Cubase have Tonalick inserted as ARA in the next update? I haven't heard of anything, so theoretically it should be that, with an ARA extension, that any ARA extension should work. I think you may need like a VST3 plugin. I haven't really played around with it or checked it out too much. But sometimes it's, we have standards so that, we don't have to rewrite all of our software when a company comes out with something new. And that's why we have plugin standards and ARA extensions. So it's, in an ideal world, we shouldn't have to do any rewriting, and it should kind of work to existing standards, especially if the company was, played a big part in coming up with those standards. So I haven't heard of anything. But sometimes because a third-party company releases something new, we still have our same, release schedule and engineering schedule. So we don't necessarily want to, So I could see, I'm not sure if there's any discussions. I'm not on the inside or privy to any of those discussions. But, it's always nice when existing standards are used so that we don't have to rewrite a good chunk of, we don't have to do a lot of development to accommodate a third-party tool. So, not sure what the status is. I can see if I can find out, but often they don't announce stuff like that in advance. So maybe you could ask Ceremony why it has to have a different ARA implementation. All right. See, lyric question had me thinking James Bond themes don't need quality lyrics. They usually try to have a song for every film as well, so they leave the lyrics for that, for. You see Gerald Elion. DJ Eric Fox asks, hello Greg, please tell us how to humanize a MIDI drum groove with static velocity, how to make it sound more real. It says, and thank you so much for your tutorials. Always glad to help. All right. So let's come over here. Let's say I want to take an acoustic agent kit here. I'll do like super generic drum pattern. So let's come over here. I'll just create a drum map from the instrument. Okay, so we'll do like super generic pattern. All right, so let's say if we want to, so we have kind of boring, and we'll just come here. All right, so pretty generic. So let's come over here, and I'm just going to select the track. Let's get to like a MIDI insert. So one of the ones I could do is a quantizer. And what I want to do is just to add more swing to this. So we listen to like our hi-hat here especially. So if we bypass this plugin, and let me make the hi-hats just a little louder in the instrument here. All right, so now if I come over, and now we put like an 88% swing on it. All right, now let's come over and just randomize the velocities. So we can go to MIDI modifiers, and we can say, okay, I want to randomize velocity. And let's say our max value, we want to be 100, and our minimum, we want to be, let's say, 60. So now going to, say, our MIDI modifiers. And we can say, okay, I want to less velocity or more velocity. We could just kind of do velocity compression. So we could also just, randomize Now, if we wanted to do something like, okay, I want to take like every other note and increase the, like on the hi-hats here. So let's come over to like the logical editor. And I think that there's even a preset that I made that came with it. So every other hi-hat is a velocity of minus 40. So here we can say we want to take velocities and now what that's done is when we look at our hi-hat, it's dropped the velocity value of every other hi-hat by 40. So play around with those things, and that should make a difference. And also if you want to put in like a little, some like stick drags, you could say, okay, I just want to and you could just give it a little bit of some like little snared drags. But stuff like that is play around with the MIDI quantizer plugin as an insert, or the MIDI modifiers, and there's also different logical editor presets. So you could, and again, this is one of the preset ones that comes with it. So if you go to the logical editor, you can say we want to take every other note and drop it by a velocity of 40. So stuff like that you could humanize drums really easily. All right, we have Tiago joining from Brazil. Sorry, I keep leaning on my keyboard today. You see Jazz Dude mentioning we have up to 10 marker tracks in Cubase 15 Pro. All right, so we see R&B Studio, Hazen Bitar did a macro which includes silence and crossfade and edit split range. Then I made it into a shortcut. However, when I execute the crossfade, applies to all of the range. Okay. Okay, so let me just see if we could replicate this. Okay, so let's say we want to silence. Okay, so let me just, so sometimes like the macro may have to, all right, so let me just come over here. Let's do detect silence. Just see if I could get a better audio file. Right, so let's come over here. Let me see. Let me have like a dialogue track. All right, so let me just we'll do a detect silence. All right, so we'll strip the silence here. Okay, so let's see. All right, so in the macro, you might have to. So let's say if we have edit and split range, made a shortcut. So let's say, I'm not sure if you. Just try this one more time. If you want to email me, so I'm not sure, sometimes you may have to select the particular range. Maybe you have to, sometimes with macros, depending on how you set it up, you may have to use the range tool to like do a crossfade between the range. So let's come over here. Let me just adjust. Yeah, let me just. Try adjust to my threshold. See if I can. Yeah, if you want to email me the macro, what it looks like, then I could take a look at it and see if I could get the macro going for you. So if you want to send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, if you want to take a screenshot of your macro. So again, if you go to like your key commands, and now we could come over and just take a screenshot of exactly what you have in your macro, and I could see if we could get it working for you. All right, so we have Jimmy Seville from Somerset, Kentucky. Says Cubase 12 Pro and Windows 11 Tascam interface, US 16.8, receiving a startup message. Some content could not be loaded due to missing or expired licensing. All right, so Cubase 12 Pro is going to be under the Steinberg licensing. So let me know if you had like earlier versions where you could see and if you have migrated your different elements. So if you come over to your Steinberg activation manager, because with version 12 was the first one that kind of went from E-licenser was on version 11, and then we had on Cubase 12 and later, it migrated to the Steinberg licensing. And when you have Cubase 12 installed, you should see a Steinberg Activation Manager. Make sure that when you open up Activation Manager that you don't have something where, it says, oh, I need to come right over here and I just haven't activated in the Steinberg Activation Manager. So check, and this is a program that's going to be installed with your Cubase. Look for Steinberg Activation Manager and just see if you have like something in red here that just says activate. Make sure that you're logged in with your My Steinberg credentials and see if we just need to activate manually there, and that would probably do it. And let me know like if it's a particular content that's not activated. The vast majority of content has been migrated over to the new licensing system, and you may have indications of that when you go to your My Steinberg account through a web browser, and you might have vouchers that you could take the voucher and simply at that point have that voucher take your e-licenser and migrate it to the Steinberg licensing. And thanks for joining us on the live stream, Jimmy. All right, and we see also in our question from Jimmy, just saying the Tascam ASIO drivers are not listed to select. The last Cubase session all was working fine. So one, make sure that you see if the Tascam is actually being listed in the computer's operating system. Usually when that happens is maybe it got disconnected. Often what happens is it gets disconnected if there was a Windows 11 update and that version didn't like if it's an older ASIO driver, so it's a US 16.8, you might have to see if it's being recognized by the computer's operating system to start with. So if you're on Mac, you can go to the audio MIDI settings, or if you're on Windows, just go to your audio MIDI game controllers and see if it's being recognized. So generally, when there's a audio interface, or MIDI interface, the Cubase program will be able to see whatever interfaces are being recognized by the operating system. So let us know if you see it there. And if you don't see that, and if you go to like your studio menu to studio setup and select your audio system here, and if you don't see your Tascam selected, then that's probably indicative. That would probably indicate that the particular interface is not being seen by the operating system. So there's nothing that Cubase can do if the driver isn't being presented to Cubase. So you might have to reinstall it, disconnect it, the USB, see if it gets recognized. So give that a try and let us know how it works out. All right, so we see Robert Higgins checking in from Morro Bay, California. Thanks for joining us today. See Ben Tyerman says he misses the old version 8 transport bar. I like having the transport bar not on top of other windows. Okay. All right, so you see Ben Tyerman just says, does version 15 work with Windows 10? So yeah, it does. So no problems there. All right, Robert Higgins just asking, I have a solo vocal track singing Gregorian chant, no tempo, no snap to grid, very free form. I would like to have Cubase add a chord track from the vocal line. So let me know if it's only going to be if there are chords in the particular file. If it's just going to be a monophonic like one single voice with no harmonies, then, Cubase, there's no chord for Cubase to detect. By definition, a chord is 3 different tones. So if it's only going to be a single line, there's no chord to detect. Sometimes you could do the chord analysis on a melody, you'll get some results, but they may not be entirely accurate because it kind of has to guess as to what chords. But if there's no chords present, the chord detection tends not to work well. But, the chord detection will take into account, like if you're singing arpeggios, it can detect arpeggios. So it could depend upon how the part is musically. All right, so we see from Parabot 2, says, Greg, I have a track with some audio and MIDI in it. Can I turn this into a template to save everything without the audio MIDI I have in a track to use with other future projects? Okay, so one of the things what I would do is come over here. I would say, let's import tracks from project. All right, so I'm going to take this particular project here. And what I want to do is I'm going to select all of the events. Okay, and what I want to do is uncheck track data to be imported. I'm not going to import the events or parts. Okay, so now we're going to come over here. So now I have none of those particular events. I'll just do new project. Except I'm going to create empty here. Okay, so go to import, file menu to import tracks from project. Select your project. We're going to uncheck events from parts. We're going to select all. Hit OK. And now we have a clean arrangement with no media in it. So at this point, save as template. And you could get rid of like the marker tracks if you need to. But at this point, once you have that, so again, import tracks from project. This would save the project. Come right over here again, select all and uncheck events and tracks. And then at that point, this way the audio files and MIDI information won't be carried over from the project into the template. So we basically, when we imported it, told it not to import any of the media. And then once you have that set up, just come right over here and save as your template. Okay. All right, so we see I did something now. Cubase won't start. It freezes, saying initializing all MIDI inputs. So let me know like what MIDI device you connected that maybe you're not using anymore. I would make sure that, so, and maybe if you uninstall the drivers for that particular device, but you could always, again, hold down if you're on a Windows platform. So if you're on Mac, it's Command Option Shift. On the Windows platform, hold down Alt Control Shift right after starting the program, and then try to disable program preferences, and that should allow you to get back into the program, and then maybe you can make those settings and restart it again. So again, start the program, and right after you double click on the icon, hold down Alt Control Shift. See, Word to our G just says he would try unplugging any MIDI devices and maybe add those one by one. That's a good suggestion as well. All right, wonderful to see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. All right, Terry Gray's watching from work. We won't tell anyone, but great to see you on. Hope you're well. All right, so we just see from NegsRec, it says, what's the best way to make beats? I think a great way to make beats is the pattern editor, just like we were kind of doing earlier. So let's come over here. Let me activate this. And I'll revert it here. All right, so let's say I want to, so you could start off just by coming over here and saying, okay, I want to right click and say, okay, I want to add a drum track. Now, once you add a drum track, it's going to open up and you could just come directly here. There's different presets if you want. So let's say, okay, I load up a preset. And you could change the sound of these. So if you say, okay, I want to change the sound on this particular, so I want to add more noise, less click, change the pitch. So you could change the oscillator. Or tone. So you could do that for each of these. Now, once I've added it as a drum track by default, it should switch over to a pattern and go to the editor and say, okay, let's just come right over here and so let's say I want to put, we'll just make it a little generic here. And say, okay, let's put a snare. Layer that with a clap. All right, and let's come over here. Let's just put in and let's go ahead and just put in a quick and I could adjust the velocity of these. All right, so if I wanted to just drag this out to my project window, I could do that. I could also just come over here and say, okay, I want to make a new version. And we could also, okay, let's say I want to take this one and I want to duplicate that pattern. And now I could add in some additional Now let's say if I want to add like a synth part, I could just kind of come right over here and say let's add an instrument track. Let's make it a retro log. Then we can say we want to make this melodic, and let's just have it randomly generate. And I could say let's make this in the key of D major. And then if I wanted to add another instrument, so let's do maybe like a writing room synth. So we can make this polyphonic. So now I can hold down my Alt key here. And now I could just come over here and just then let's go ahead and we'll just transpose this up an octave. I'll take that out of probably monophonic mode. So before you know it, you could have just a quick beat done without playing a single MIDI note, just utilizing tools with the pattern editor. So let me know if that makes sense. So it's a pretty good way of making beats. All right, wonderful to see Beverly Beatty on from Vancouver. Beverly says she's late to the party. She had to pull into the local musical store and get a newer cowbell. All right, so we see from Wismo74, it says, yes, Elgato and Panorama is on the MIDI remote, but randomly working or not. So usually if it's, make sure that it's not being utilized. So if you see the panorama, so devices that, again, are kind of set up for like, a generic remote or utilizing Mackie control, if they're configured here under the legacy remote devices, then those generally will take the MIDI communications away from, from the MIDI remote area. So we can think of this as more legacy, and the MIDI remote is being more contemporary with that. So make sure that the MIDI ports aren't being utilized for any of the legacy MIDI devices. All right, so you see Saber Tooth Bicycle, I think he's getting a coffee. So. All right, so we see from Negsrec just saying how to use the MIDI functions. So once you have a MIDI track, so we can say, okay, I want to add an instrument track. We could choose an instrument. So let's say I want to go to Hallian Sonic, and here we could load up different instruments. So let's say I want to open up like one called Etude. So if I come over here, now we could play this particular sound. So as I come over here, all right, so now if we want to record that information from a MIDI sequencer, I could come in, I'll just come over here. So once I have it set to a MIDI part, when I go to record, and now we can have all of your MIDI data show up here where we could edit it to change the pitch, the length, or if we want to double click to erase notes as well. So, but if there's anything more detailed with MIDI, let me know what you exactly want to accomplish. Wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Always wonderful to see you on. All right, so Greg Strange grabbed a guitar vent, dropped it into the chord track, no chord showed, tried a similar guitar in the same song, worked straight away. Any thoughts why the first guitar track didn't work? So it's hard to know. Okay. So it could be that maybe there's not 3 notes going on in a chord. So obviously with a lot of guitar stuff, you may have, what they call an E5 chord, which technically isn't a chord. It's a dyad instead of a triad. So if there's not 3 distinct pitches, the chord track won't actually depend. You won't be able to detect it. All right, so we have Fran Fuzz says, hey there, an Ableton to Cubase migrator over here. So thanks for being part of the family. All right, so we see from Fran Fuzz, is there a way to change the snap behavior to match the visual grid we are seeing? This is very helpful in Ableton. So one is make sure that you're set to grid here. So let's say if I now have a particular event. So now I have this set to grid, and I have J is turning the snap on or off. So right now we can say we're going to snap to the beat, and when I go to cut, it's only going to allow me to cut at the beat. So let's say if I have this particular event here. So now as I cut, it's only going to allow me to snap to the beat or cut to the beat. As we do this, now that I move the event, it's only snapping to the beat. I could also choose this to only snap to the bar. Now make sure that this is set to grid, because now let's say if I have this starting just a little, I'm going to take my snap off, and again J is snap on or off, the letter J in your computer keyboard. Let's say this is slightly earlier and I have it set to grid relative. Now as I move the event here, so let's say, okay, I'm going to move it to the beat, it will snap to the same amount of early or late. So because we have grid relative, now we also have grid events. So let's say, okay, I move this event, I want to start to be on the grid here. Okay, and let's say I have another event later in my project here, and let's say this event is slightly early. Okay, so let's say I move this event here, and it's going to be not necessarily on a grid. Now if we choose to snap to the events, now this will automatically not snap to the grid, but snap to the event, regardless of where that event is on a grid position. If we want to adjust our grid here, so let's say I'm going to do what we call a shuffle mode. So when I go to shuffle, if I move this event to the left over this event, these two events will kind of swap places. So we can see kind of if I move this red event over, those two events will just kind of swap places. And then we could also adjust to cursor. So let's say, okay, my cursor's right here. Now I want this event to snap to the cursor. Now we have different ways of working when we're on a grid. So we could have it by the bar beat. And if we wanted to use the quantize, we could say now I want this to be only to snap to 16th notes, or I want this to snap to 16th note triplets. As I move, the start of the position is snap to 16th note triplets. So we could use the bar, the beat, the quantize setting, but there's also an adapt to zoom. So if I'm kind of zoomed out like this, now when we go to snap, it'll snap to like half a bar. If I zoom out more, now it's going to snap to the bar. So let's say I zoom in further, this will probably snap to the 8th note. So I'll just come over here. So now that's snapping only to the beat. If we zoom in further, it's going to snap to the 16th note. So the snap will change based on your level of zoom. So, but to make sure that when you're working, the key to snap kind of working, of the events complying to snap or not, is just to make sure that the snap is turned on, and the letter J is a great shortcut to get familiar with. So let me know if that works as you expect it to. And welcome to Cubase, and we hope to see you on many more live streams so we can help you transition fully. All right, so Edmund M3, hi Greg, how to change the velocity of one or two MIDI notes in the same position using down levels area but not the upper velocity values. Keeps changing both notes even if you highlight it from in the grid. All right, so let's say if we have two notes here, and let's say we have multiple notes So let's say I want to edit the velocity of the top note here, or one of these notes. Let's say all these notes are starting at the same position. I think this is what the question is. So, and you look at this and it's hard to know exactly from the line right here what you're actually editing velocity. So if you hold down Control or Command plus Shift and just hover over the note, you could adjust the velocity of one single note without affecting the other pitches. So you could select the velocity value and type in, I want this to be 112, or again just, and then you hear the velocity change and how it's going to respond to the particular note. So Control or Command plus the Shift key and just kind of hover over the note, hold the left mouse button down, move it up to increase or down to decrease the velocity. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do to adjust like one velocity note within a chord directly. All right, so Beverly says, don't forget to cowbell Greg in your dance masterpiece today. So I did cowbell earlier, so but I'll try to incorporate it in future beats. So you got to call out for the cowbell influence. Okay, so Word 2RG says would like to see some OmniVocal. Yeah, so let me just play a little bit of song with it in. All right, so let's say I just have a little etude piano part here, and I have my MIDI. So, you know, to work with OmniVocal, when we're here, we could just kind of select the particular words, and we could see what the actual text is in our key editor here. So we'll see. So as you kind of select a particular word, we'll come over. So let's say,
I know what you sing in the shower. I know how it sounds when you weep.
this I might just put together quickly, like about 30 minutes for.
What you pray for at daybreak. I know what you say.
And now if you wanted to just adjust the, I could come over here and just use my modulation wheel for vibrato. Now let's say if we wanted to be female singer, we could just come directly over here. Let's get a female. We could adjust the format, kind of the expression, power, presence.
I know what you sing in the shower.
So let's adjust the format here.
I know how it sounds.
Probably more range for a male singer.
I know what you prayed for at daybreak.
So.
I know what you said in your sleep, 'cause I know you.
So again, it's nice additions to having the vibrato on the mod wheel.
Change me to my core. I don't have to worry, wonder where you are. Right here in the center of my heart. I know all your scars and the story.
Be more soft.
From your head down to the soles of your feet. I know of your dry and glory. I know where you met with defeat, 'cause I know you.
So it gives you an idea what you can do with OmniVocal. So it's really just having the melody in and entering the lyrics. So all right. All right, so we see from Vince just saying he hasn't had any way of getting Cubase to start since I got the update. So try to, when you go through the startup, come over here. So I'm going to do it into safe mode, Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift. So not only can you try to disable preferences, but also maybe deactivate third-party plugins and see what happens then. And if you're still having problems, maybe after the live stream, if you want to email me, I could do a quick, if you have access to Zoom, I could take a quick look at it afterward if you want, Vince. And if you have like MIDI controllers, as we mentioned before, disconnect those and see if you get it to start up, and then connect your controllers one at a time. See Beverly giving kudos to Jazz Dude for all the drum templates. All right, so we see just a clarification. All right, so we see from Brian DeBear, just says, why are my emails? And that's all we see. If you want to email me directly, Brian at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could take a look. Let me just see if there's any emails that have come in. All right, yeah, so if you want to email me, I didn't see any messages, and maybe got cut off in the YouTube comments. Sorry about that, Brian. Okay, so we see kind of clarification. It says, I meant the functions in the MIDI tab. There are some things like legato and velocity. Okay, so let's say if we have take a look at, let's just create a part here. All right, so let's say we want to look at all right, so I have some notes here. Okay, so let's just come over, we'll zoom, we'll make these. All right, so let's say if we want to do, I think it's maybe these that are working. So let's say now if we want to have these notes last until the next note starts, what we could do is just come over here to your MIDI to legato. And now we can see that the length of the notes is extended. I'll just make this full screen. So the length, when we do legato, the note will last until the next note starts. So that's what legato does. And let me just see if there's, if you're over here, let's, and some of the other, these are the functions. But you know, here, if we, let's say if we have velocity, and our velocity is changing, so we see like the bluer colored notes have a less velocity than red colored notes. So if we want to, let's say if I select all of these notes and we want to adjust the velocity, we could go to the functions. We could say, okay, let's get to velocity, and I want to add or subtract 10. I want to compress the velocity by 100%. We could also, so we have different functions right there. And again, we could say I want it to be fixed to be 100. I want a 10% variance in velocity. So let's say, okay, now I want like a fluctuation within the velocity so that those can just simply change a little bit. So that way it's not going to be the same velocity all the time. So, but let me know if there's other ones that you kind of want to get figured out. Right. My chat field just jumped. Let me. All right, Jackie Barr says, I'm also learning Dorico. Wondered if there's a way in Cubase to export the chord track or copy chord names and paste them into the Dorico score. So I know, let's say if we come over, let's say I'm looking at this. So I'm not sure if the chord track we could paste. Let me just come over here quickly and we'll create chord events from the piano part here. All right, so now when I come over here, we can see our chords that are here. Let's go my file menu and say let's export a Dorico project. So I'm not sure if you need the chords separately. Okay, so now we will open Dorico. And now all the chords are directly carried over. So if you, even if you just have a blank, so if I wanted to, so let's say I have the chords and I want to create just a blank event. So let's say I have this, I could now create a blank event that is the length. And now I could just export just the chords. But I don't think we could export just the chord track, but you could, if you have it inside of Cubase, the chords from Cubase, the score editor, so open the score editor, export it as a Dorico project, and then you could just simply have the chords carried directly over for you. Let me know if that is helpful. Okay, so we see from USA Roman or USA Roman. Hi, Greg. The lo-fi hip-hop template in Cubase 15 reports is asking to resolve a missing sample, but the missing file gives no clue to which sample bank it belongs to. All right, let's take a look. Just seeing if looks like I may not have that template. Let me see if I could just open another computer quickly and see if I can get it to do it there as well. Bear with me just a moment. Charge it here real quick. Yeah. All right, I'll see if I'll come back to the question in just a minute. All right, so we see the next question. Can the volume curve automation on events be hidden even when hovering over said events? Okay. Okay, so let's say if we have volume curves here. Okay, so if we want these to be hidden, let's see if all right, so that removed it. All right, let me see if it's a preference. Okay, so here, if you go to event display to audio, so it could be always or on mouse over hover. But I'm not sure. So we can have it on all the time or just when it's, we just see if there's any other. Okay, so maybe show event volume curve to never. And let's hit apply. So let's see if we do always, always, never for that, if that makes. Try this one more time. Let's see if we adjust this to minimum. So you could, looks like if you come over here, adjust it to minimum. Here, I'm not sure why there's two show event volume curve controls. So here it should be a lot less visible. So try coming over here to show event volume curves and the event volume. Try setting that to minimum and see if that helps. All right, Reynold Martin says, sometimes I do my editing on a laptop when I'm in bed in the middle of the night. When I run into a problem, it is shocking how accurate Grok is for any of my immediate need questions. That's great. Gonna put me out of work, but they probably use me too as data for input. But it's all right, so see, Word 2RG says, so you could assign the mod wheel for real-time vibrato, etc. So on the working with the OmniVocal, and that was like one of the things that was incorporated into the latest version, which came out with 15.02. So now, as soon as you go to your OmniVocal here, you could, it's by default your the vibrato, the manual vibrato is directly controlled from your mod wheel. So you don't have to do any configuration with that. Sorry, I have the wrong cable connected into my laptop, so it's not powering on. Bear with me a second. There you see Michael Teams granting Jazzy 1 gallon of Mango Supreme ice cream. And Uno Mementos received 1 gallon of Papaya Pecan ice cream. Very creative flavor. Great to see you on, Michael. All right, so we see Peter Bata on from Montreal. Great to see you. All right, so you just see a question. Hi, Greg. I'm noticing that I'm unable to hide channels if they are located in the left zone. Is this how it's supposed to work? All right, let's take a look. All right, so let's say if we come over here, I have channels in. So let's say I'll just hide my input channels for now. Let's take like these, some drum tracks here. Okay, I'm going to go to my visibility to zones. And let's put those into our left zone. Okay, so now we see those in the left zone. Let me go back to the track visibility here. And doesn't seem like they hide in the left zone. Let me just see if we do it outside of the folder group. All right, so we have audio 1 through 6 here. Yeah, it doesn't look like they're hidden. I thought that they would be. Let me try putting them in the right zone, see if that makes any difference. So I'm not sure, I don't remember if we could do that in earlier versions or not. Let me open up 14 here real quick and I'll just check to see if there's any change in behavior. Not sure if it's a design intention. So it looks like they're hidden, but not in the mix console. So let me just see if we hide them here. Yeah, so it looks like the left and right zones don't hide. So maybe that's the design intention. I'll pass it on as maybe people would like the ability to do that. All right, I have my other computer booted up now. Let me see if I can open up see if I have the lo-fi template here. My other computer. Okay, so I have my lo-fi hip hop. All right, so I'm going to activate the template. All right, so it looks like everything on my system opened up. So I see kind of the beat, I see the vinyl crackle loop, the dusty bar piano, bass, and sax sample. So I kind of see, and this is kind of what it sounded like on my laptop speaker. So let me know like which file isn't opening up, and maybe there's a loop that's in there that's called lo-fi ambience 16 vinyl crackle underscore 1D. So maybe you don't have all of the content sets installed, but with my Cubase 15 here, it's loading up all of the files from the lo-fi hip-hop template as expected. So maybe check to see when you go to the Steinberg download assistant that you have all of the content that comes with Cubase 15 installed. So when we come to your Cubase 15, you'll see loops and samples. Make sure you have all of these installed, because probably that one loop is coming from one of these content sets. So let me see if I can figure out which content set it is. Okay, so this is the loop. So see if you have this, if you look for lo-fi ambience underscore 16, vinyl crackle. And let me see if it's in lo-fi dreams. So if you come over here to the lo-fi dreams, make sure you have this one, and this is the loop that's referenced in there. So let me know if you're missing that, or if you have the lo-fi dreams content set installed. Okay, so all right. Jazz Dude sharing a link for Cubase keyboard shortcuts. All right, Tim K's received 1 gallon of Andy's mint chocolate ice cream. All right, Beverly Beatty asked Greg question regarding drum machine. If I begin a new drum preset such as raw motion, then modified sounds, how do I save my modified drum kit for future use? Okay, so let's say we'll add a drum track. Okay, so we'll do raw motion. Raw motions. All right, so let's say we have this. All right, so let's say I want to take this particular and let's tune. So we'll just come over here, let's adjust. All right, so let's say now I save this. What you want to do is now just come over here, save it as a track preset. So we'll call this April 17th, 2026. Okay, so now when I come over here, we could say, okay, I want to go to, I'm going to delete, so let's say now I want to come over to user presets, track presets, drum, and then now I'll just come here and we could just load it directly up and have kind of our same kick sound. So now we can come, so between the two. So once you again come over here in the right where you see the track preset name, it's saved as a track preset. To open that up again in the future, go to user presets, to track presets, to drum, and then you could just come right over there. Or if you're at the presets, you could just say, okay, I want to go to user presets, and then if you give it a unique name, then you can just find it just like that. So, all right, you see Gerald Ely, Step Away. Thanks for joining us today. He's received 1 gallon of chocolate eclair ice cream. Okay, so we see from Negsrec asks, what does the reverse and mirror functions do in MIDI? All right. Okay, so I'll just add a quick MIDI track here. Okay, so let's come here. Okay, so we have some MIDI data in here. All right, so let's say we have, I want to affect these notes here. All right, so we go to MIDI. Let's come over here and let's reverse the MIDI. So we'll see that the MIDI part is basically playing backwards. So if we come here, if we undo that, so where we're ending on D3, we're starting on D3. So it's basically reversing that particular MIDI. Now let's take a look at the mirror function. So let's say if we have, I'll just come here, we just put in some additional MIDI. notes. Okay, so let's say I'll just take a look at these. So let's take those particular notes and let me just copy those notes there. Okay, so let's mirror these notes. So that way it's almost just like flipping those particular notes in order. So kind of more of the curve around there. All right, so we see the Peter at Montreal is finally getting a little bit of sunshine, so that's good. Yeah, we're hit the 90s already. It's what I think we're supposed to be about 25 degrees colder tomorrow after a rainstorm comes in. All right, so we have Reverend House says, thank you, Greg, and questionnaires. I've had a lot of fun, learned about polyrhythms and the pattern editor and microtuning. Big thanks. All right. See, Peter is just mentioning my pronunciation was bang on this time for his last name, so I try to remember. But then, like, one time, you're like, haven't I been on enough live streams where I'm just Peter? So, but it's always great to see you on. Hope you're enjoying your weather. All right, so we have Dwight Cunningham checking in from Bahamas. Great to see you on. Says, test the OmniVocal beta. It's awesome. Actually making a jingle for radio stations. Thank you, Cubase. Thanks, Greg. So I had little to do with it. I just get to show all the great things that it was kind of a joint project between Yamaha and Steinberg with that. Okay, so we see Fly V says he's got his Cubase up and running, so that's great news. All right. All right, we see Michael Teams is granted Rick 1 gallon of lovely lemon meringue pie ice cream. Let's see, in class, just mentioning high channels in the left position in the lower mixer, but not in the lower zone mixer. Yes, usually the lower zone mixer always follows kind of, so I'm not sure if it's intended for that. So Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of Moose Tracks ice cream for myself and the family. I'm sure my son will eat it all. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Beverly Beatty's saying, fantastic, thank you, Greg. So thanks for your question. All right, so we see Word 2 2RG says, I see there's no upgrade path from Groove Agent 6 SE. That seems a bit odd. Well, with Groove Agent, usually when you're doing an upgrade path, it's from a version that you paid for. But let me just check, because, because basically you didn't pay any, you have Groove Agent SE as a part of Cubase. So since, but if you bought a full version of Groove Agent, you could upgrade from that. But let me just check to see. Yeah, so since the SE version is coming with, with Cubase, and you didn't pay for like a full Groove Agent license, that's why there's, it's not considered something to upgrade from. So, but there are sales periodic, there are sales throughout the year for Groove Agent, like we're currently in a Cubase sale. But that's why you don't see the upgrade path from Groove Agent SEs, because you didn't purchase Groove Agent SE as a separate product. All right. All right, so Parabot2 says, thanks, Greg. He made his first template. That's always great. All right, let me go to, we had a couple questions that were mailed in. Let me just revert this project here. All right, so the first question we had was how to easily EQ two tracks at once to resolve frequency clashes. Okay. All right, so let's say we have a project that's playing, and like let's say we have our kick drum and our bass guitar are kind of clashing with each other. So let's say I want to come over to my kick track. So let's say as we're playing this, we can... All right, so I go to my kick drum track and we go to the channel EQ. So I could... track. All right, so let me just... All right, and let's say we want to listen to our bass. All right, so what I'm going to do is just go to my channel settings here. All right, now we have this thing that a lot of people don't know of, which is a channel comparison EQ. So what I'm going to do is activate this, and we can see that the track I'm on now is our kick track, and I'm going to go to the bass track. So now what I could do is I could see the frequencies of the bass track kind of underneath here. And if I click here, now I'm EQing the bass part. And I could go back to my kick drum and say, okay, now to my bass part, and we could just come over here and just kind of really dial in the EQ. So let's say, okay, it's so now, again, what you can do is just kind of come right over here. So, okay, let's go to our bass. Let's now come over to our kick drum. And if we wanted to, we could kind of set up, you know, different colors for these. If we wanted to adjust kind of the transparency, we could also just kind of come over here. So let's say, okay, let's make this 90%. For a channel comparison. This way we could see, and this way we could just kind of dial back and forth between our different EQs, and we see again the little settings. So let's say for reference, let's make this 90% so we could make it more obvious. And you can see exactly what frequencies are clashing. So if you want to, so if I boosted the bass there, that would probably be problematic. So a lot of times when you're looking to solve EQ problems, find to accentuate the problem, and then you could just adjust the gain to resolve the problem. But now you could just, by clicking right here, you could just switch back and forth between the channel EQs of two different channels, so that you could resolve different clashing between those particular channels. All right. Okay, so you see Tim K just says regarding upgrades, updates, cross grades, I suggest everyone stick around. Everything seems to rotate through the promos about once a year. In my experience so far, watch for loyalty offers too. That's great advice. So say Tim is just saying if we could thumbs up individual post here in the chat stream, I'd be hammering at Jazz Dude. His links and comments all the time. Love all you guys and gals, just saying, super helpful. So yeah. All right, so we see from Fly V, he says, I have one last problem, Greg, with the update. I have no way of hearing my vocals effects. Do you maybe know why? So make sure, check just to make sure when you come over that you go to your studio setup. So if you're running like the effects in real time, it could be that when you select your audio interface that you have direct monitoring turned on. So if you have direct monitoring turned on, try to turn that off, and that way when you're recording you could monitor through the effects with direct monitoring enabled here. It will send the audio input directly to the audio output, and it will basically bypass different software effects like plugins. So make sure that unchecking direct monitoring, again from studio to studio setup, select audio interface and uncheck direct monitoring. Okay, let's go back to a couple more questions. All right, so we see I've been a Steinberg user since Pro 24 and Atari, now using Cubase 1502 on an M1 Mac. I'm still picking up tips from your live streams, so many thanks. I really appreciate your work and time. Says a question regarding the new group channel folder. Solo and mute folder appears to work correctly only for audio and instrument tracks. Is this type of folder not supposed to be used for MIDI tracks? So kind of the intention is, more of, we could think of it more as being a hybrid approach to a folder and group channel. So right now when we take this, we could enable the, we could enable the group channel, or we could disable the group channel. So traditionally what we've had before was, we could have a folder track and have a group track. And if we add a MIDI track, so let me just add a MIDI track here. So we'll do that. Now when I go to the folder and I solo the folder, we can see that the MIDI is enabled. And we come here and now the MIDI is muted and soloed with the folder track. Now, a MIDI track itself has no sound, obviously. So a MIDI track is going to send the MIDI data out to a virtual instrument or out to like a keyboard. So let's say if I go to my VST instruments here, but the actual, but a MIDI track itself has no sound. Now, a MIDI track being sent to a virtual instrument, that virtual instrument will have a sound. But let's come over here, let's add a rack instrument, let's say a pad shop. Okay, so we're going to load up pad shop here. All right, so we have a pad shop here. So now this MIDI track, it can't be sent to the folder. So we can have it tucked away in the folder. But when we solo, since there is no audio, it looks like the pad shop MIDI just soloed. So we see our MIDI track here and the pad shop. So maybe that was maybe addressed in the 15021. So, but it looks like that is soloing. And we can see that the pad shop is soloing. So maybe that was resolved in 15021, the hotfix. So it looks like that's working. But I could see where, since it didn't have audio, that it might have not soloed that, but it seems like the MIDI tracks are now being soloed directly. And I'll add another MIDI track within the folder. I'll send it out to, let's say my CC, let me send it out to my UR2242 port. Add the track. All right, so I'm going to mute. They all get muted, and they all, let me solo the folder. And now they're all soloed. So it looks like maybe that was resolved in the 15021. All right, so we see, hi Greg, here's another strange one I'm struggling with. I have two guitar parts. One just with a capo. I cannot create a chord track for one, but can for another. The track I want to use won't allow me. So, make sure, again, and I think this is earlier discussion, maybe that particular part didn't have 3 notes that made a chord. So maybe it was like a power chord, or like, something like what people often refer to as a 5 chord, which is the root, the perfect fifth, and the octave. So while there's 3 notes, there's not 3 separate pitches. So that would probably, need to make sure that you have 3 separate pitches for it to determine chords. All right, let me jump back. See if we have more. All right. All right, let me just go back and all right, so we're seeing Michael Team says he spent hours going through the libraries in Hallion 7. So yeah. All right, Michael Teams asks, I've started getting clicks and short dropouts on playback of tracks. Where should I look for issues? So the first thing I would look for is, see what happens if you raise the buffer size. So if you go to studio setup, select your audio interface, go to the control panel, see if, raising the buffer size helps and that kind of mitigates it. And it could be sometimes like, as you're working on a project and maybe you're getting to the mixing stage, like some people would want to have a lower buffer for tracking so that they have, they can minimize the latency during the tracking process. But if you're kind of in the mixing process, I would try to, try raising the buffer size. That would be the first thing I would do. If you kind of raise the buffer size and it's still there, it could mean that something is interrupting with the audio performance and kind of the real-time audio performance of the system. So as you're kind of working with that, one of the things, I'm pretty sure you're on Windows, Michael, but, see if you could run the latency mon and see if that makes a difference. But the first thing I would do is just try to raise the buffer and see how, if that changes the behavior, and often that will do it. So you see from Tim K, just says, today you're explaining some of the things I recognize from my first couple of Club Cubase sessions. Only gee whiz, it makes a lot more sense now than it did then. It really pays to stick around here. So glad it's helpful, and we appreciate you having you here, and so does my cat. So, and thanks for being part of the great community. All right. Okay, so we see from Beverly, Greg, question about that lo-fi hip-hop preset. Do you know which preset that drum loop was taken from? It does show the preset name. It's empty in that name field. So I think it's the file, which preset that. So the drum loop, I believe, is if you come over here, go to your media, to loops and samples, and go to lo-fi dreams. And then it's this one, vinyl crackle here. And so that's where that particular loop comes from. Now, if you want another way to get that type of sound, we do have a plugin. This is an oldie but a goodie. If you come over here to like your stereo output, we can just come to the inserts, and under distortion, you could go to grungelizer. It's kind of an oldie but a goodie, but you can add noise, crackle at 33, 45, or 78 RPM, distortion, AC hum at 50. or 60 cycles, depending if you're in Europe or America. Kind of your EQ, kind of your mix overall. So there's a plugin that will do that for you as well. Kind of an interesting story. If you remember that movie Wag the Dog, and I think Nuendo was used for the post-production of that, and they had to take a song, like to make a patriotic song and make it sound old. And that plugin was actually used for that. I think the song was like about a dying dog called Old Shep or something, some patriotic, political, kind of a political song that they're using, just kind of. So this was like one of the early movies done in Nuendo, and they used a plugin for that. So nice political propaganda song. All right, so you see that word 2RG just says OmniVocal has me considering the new Pro version. So there's currently a 30% off sale, so it's probably a good chance to update, because usually the sales don't come that often on Cubase. So check it out. See, Parabot 2 is just telling Michael Teams that he commits to audio once he gets a nice sound and howling in other. So found myself being slowed down with so many great sounds, etc. All right, so I see from USA Roman, I think this is with the lo-fi hip-hop. It says it's the solo sax sample, so let me look at that. I'm going to open up my other system here. Bear with me. All right, let me just on my other computer here. All right, so that's going to be, all right. Okay, so the file on that is going to be 25 sax solo wave. All right, so let me take a look. Let's just jump to Big Media Bay. All right, so this is in the sampler track. All right, so it's going to be in the Loop Mash library. So if you're looking for that particular sax sample, it's going to be, if we come over here to the Loop Mash library. It's a 25 sax solo wave. So again, if you go to the Steinberg download assistant, this can be one of the included available options for your Cubase 15. So if we come over here to loops and samples, you'll see loop mash content. So make sure that that content, that you have that installed, or you could try to reinstall it if you have it already. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, all right, so we see John Barry just mentions feature request. I like the new automation panel in the right zone, but I would really like the channel zone to be an option in the left zone on the mixer windows, particularly on a multi-screen setup. Cheers. Yeah, I did have some discussions about a month ago about some things like that, so I'll mention it as well. I've also had requests for people wanting to have like the plugin windows. So for here, to have like your VST effects on the right hand zone of the mix console, that could be kind of dragged over as well. So if you wanted to see this in the mix console, to have a right zone that is going to be not only just the control room functionality, but also maybe plugins here that could be dragged and dropped into the mix console. But thanks for the feature request, John. Michael Teams just mentioned a great idea to get what you want and then update when the sale comes along, or a loyalty buy. And Rick is from Batman Series says the only way you can get off without feeling guilty. Yeah, I just bought a microwave, a Waldorf microwave today for the live stream on sale. All right, so we see Michael Teams just says, thanks, Greg, just says that the CPU the latency mon was jumping to 100% during the glitches. So all right, so we see from Rick, she says, thanks, Greg. It's a really special place we got here. Sometimes I kind of feel like Bill and Ted is, and we're not worthy with the celeb guests, but we're all welcome, and that's amazing. So what I think is interesting about, anyone's journey with a digital audio workstation, is everyone kind of starts off in the same spot, and just with making mistakes and experiencing different things in your own usage, that's how you get to be fast and learn. I often, as you've heard me, liken it to learning a music instrument. So even, we may have, like our last special guest, is doing Paul McCartney records and Tony Bennett and, the Bangles and, just a who's who, and it was A&R guy who's signed amazing artist. And, he had the same questions we all did when he was starting, when he was starting off. It's just, he's been doing it longer. So that's what I hope to do with this forum, is to kind of, have people learn from other people's questions, as well as, just seeing, like a different workflow Because I know, like, even when I've worked with, like occasionally, I'll get together with like Hans Zimmer and spend a day or two with him, and he's just like, I want to know how a hip hop guy works because I've been doing it my way forever, and there's probably an update that fixed something, and I'm doing 7 steps that could be 1, but I know how to do those 7 steps, so I'm going to just do that. But there's probably another workflow that could really speed things up. So seeing how other people work with software, and if it's a completely different genre, everyone can learn a lot. So hopefully I'm providing a way so people could, see best operating practices when using Cubase. All right. Beverly Beatty just saying that lo-fi template is royalty free. Is that correct to assume? So yeah, all the content that you get with Steinberg is royalty free. So Jazz Dude is saying that song is Good Old Shoe. Says he knows his movies. That's good. Well done, Jazz Dude. All right, so we see Bratman Studio. Greg, can you demo how to quantize audio, say drums, with time warp or moving the beats with a cursor at each beat? I did something wrong, didn't work like you do. All right. All right, so when we are quantizing audio, generally we're going to have like a hit point. Let me just see if I can find. So let's see if we can find. We'll show just kind of a single event, and then we will quantize some drums, like a multi-track. All right, let me just. I think this might be mostly single samples. Okay, so let's say this one has a good, nice swing shuffle on the pattern here. All right, so you take this pattern and let me slow it way down here. It says. Okay, so let's say we just want to change the feel of this particular loop. We wanted to make it more straight. All right, so when audio is imported into Cubase, it's automatically going to have hit points that are applied to it. So when we go to our audio, I could come over here and say, okay, we want to do an eighth note quantize. And I want this now to make sure that the audio warp quantize is checked. So once I do this, we're going to say audio warp quantize. Now we're going to kind of lose a shuffle feel. Now let's say if I wanted to adjust the swing, let's say 88% swing. And you could see the waveform here in the audio event move. So it's going to be using those hit points too. So now we could, again, just kind of come over. Now, if we wanted to manually just move some notes around, what we could do is come over here and we say, let's go to free warp. And once we have free warp, we're going to have those warp markers. I'm going to select the particular event here. And if we go to our audio, and would say, okay, let's create our warp markers from hit points. And now we switch to our free warp tool. I can now move my hit points here. So if I want that to be behind the beat or to snap to being on the beat, we can adjust. If I don't record, that would be helpful. So now we can, so again, once we have our free warp, we can see our markers, and then we move just to the right of the marker, and we could manually do it. But if I wanted to take this again, and we quantize it, let's say to eighth notes, and we say, okay, I want no swing. Could just kind of quantize the audio that way. But Rick, let me know if you need me, if I could show kind of a multi-track quantizing, like a multi-track drum quantizing. If you need to see that as well, just leave a comment if you want me to do that. All right, so we see from John Barry, it says a recent issue I had with the toggle bypass and new folder tracks actually makes me change my setup as a disable and enable work fine as two shortcuts. Actually works better for me than toggle, so it's great. All right, Capelli Official just says, hey Greg, in previous versions of Cubase, you could change the routing of multiple channels in the arrangement window by using the quick edit function, Shift plus Alt. That doesn't work for me anymore. All right, so let me add a number of audio tracks here. All right, so let's say we have 10 audio tracks. Let me just... All right, so all these audio tracks are going out to stereo out. I'm just going to go down. We can see the output here hasn't changed. So what I want to do is I'm going to select those two. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and I'm going to change it to, let's say, the left output. Okay, so now I come over here. We see our left output as I select my different channels. So that kind of works as expected for me. One thing that might trip it up is if you have changed, like if we go into your preferences or settings, so settings on Mac OS, preferences on Windows, and you go to editing to tool modifiers, and let's see if we go to the select tool. I think if we... So sometimes like this setting here may mess it up, but it seems like it's working as expected. So again, if I want to take all of these and change it to the right output, Alt or Option plus Shift, and now it's going to the right. So we go from the bottom, we can see right stereo out. And as we select all of our tracks, so but again, check that one preference and see under editing tool modifiers, select tool. Let's just see if we come over here. But there's some other tool modifiers, but it seems to still work for me. Jazz Dude pasted a link to the movie Wag the Dog. Yeah. Be pretty interesting to watch now. It could be timely. All right. All right, so we see Beverly Beatty says, I was referring actually to the drum beat in the Cubase lo-fi template. Not sure where the beat was derived from. Not sure if it was a preset or just named the drum beat. All right, let me look at it in my other system. So I think it's a pattern event. So let me open it up here. So if you double click on, let me just see if it is. All right, so it's just track preset name. So let me come over here, and so for that drum, so let's go to our media bay. Let's get to our let's get to not user presets, but to presets, track presets, drum. It might be. Let me just see if I could find. Yeah, I don't see. Let me just see if I can find if that's just a preset. It might have been one that someone just made. Let me just look. It's just called beat, so it's super generic. So we go from bass to beast here. So it might be just custom made for that particular template. But let me just. Yeah, someone may have just programmed that particular beat. So it might not be a preset, but you could just open up the template and save it as a preset if you need to, Beverly. And add a cowbell while you're at it. See, I don't see it listed as a obvious kind of name called beat or preset called beat, but I could play around with it if you need to. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence checking in from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so you see from Gray Lush Productions, it says, I have an issue where I can't crossfade. It's grayed out. Would you know why and how to manage it? All right, so let's say if we have like 2 different audio files. Okay, so you have to come over here. So if we go to audio, to fades, and we say, okay, we're going to do crossfade. So maybe make sure that you have the 2 events, or because you're going to need to have an event selected. So sometimes functions don't work if nothing is selected. So let's say these 2 are overlapping or they're right next to each other. If no events are selected and you get a fades, you don't see crossfade. If the 2 events are selected, you can now come over here because now there's events that it knows where you want to apply the crossfade. So now if we zoom in, we'll see that we'll have just a crossfade, or if we have the 2 events that are slightly overlapping here, and then I hit X, we could see the crossfade. So now we get audio to fades to crossfades, we'll see that. But if none of the events are selected and told what to do crossfades on, it's grayed out. If there isn't anything that's eligible to be crossfaded, so make sure that you select the events if you see it kind of grayed out. And then you should be able to just kind of do the crossfade. And you could also do that by hitting the letter X. Great. Jazz Dude's good, says it's the Beatmaker's Delight kit. All right, so let's come over here to add a drum track. Extra ice cream for Jazz Dude. So, try that, Beverly. Thank you, Jazz Dude. Michael Team says, I learn new things every time I'm here with everybody. And Graham Witchers also says ditto to that. Wonderful to see you on, Graham, from Oxford. All right, so we see from Rick, just says, Greg, that's all the things I forgot to do. Thanks. I need to make more room in my brain. Me too. All right. Word to RG says that kit sounds great. All right, so we see from Groovy Johnson Gaming, is there a way to split the drum track into separate tracks? So not built in, but if you have spectral layers, you can. So I'll show you what we could do with spectral layers. So let's say if I have, I'll just take, just find something a little more. Okay, so let's say we want to take this. So if you have the full version of spectral layers, we can now come over here and go to spectral layers. And again, this is an add-on sale. Spectral layers Go, you could remove like voice from a track, but let's say if we want to come over here, so once we're here, we could say, okay, let's come over to our module. We'll say unmixed drums. All right, so now we will, so we could just solo. So just take the snare. And now let's take the hi-hat. And now the cool thing is I can say, okay, I want the kick to be softer. So I could scroll over here. I could also take my kick, snare, and hi-hat. And drag them to the project here. All right, so let me just turn on my. All right, so now that I've done this, I can, so say I want to take the snare and run it through like a pitch shifter. So I could select the snare track here. But again, that's kind of an add-on, but there's so many other amazing, like, save your project kind of scenarios that Spectral Layers is so great at, but you could unmix a whole song or unmix a drum beat as well. So if you do that a lot, Spectral Layers is a great investment to make. See, Graham Witcher is saying Cubase is like the universe. Just when you think you discovered one galaxy, you find another one with different features. All right, so you see Val checking in from Vienna. Says he's got lots of work, crazy deadlines. Thanks for taking time to pop in today. All right, sorry, Chatfield jumped. All right. All right. So we see question from Val. It says, when I import multiple tracks, it puts them all on one lane. Is it possible to have it like it's previously on their own tracks? So I think if we drag, so let's come over here. Let's get to new project. So we have blank behavior. Okay, so let's say if I want to come over to, let's get to my file browser. All right, so let's say if I come over here, we have my audio track. All right, so if I drag these over to my project, so like from Media Bay, it automatically puts each one on its own track. If we go to import audio files, so let's say I come here, all right, and now I select like all of these particular files. All right, then so, but a lot of times when you drag, let's say if I drag these over, all right, so try dragging to empty to the track area, and then they'll all go to tracks. But let me just see if I have a track selected. So let's see if I have a track selected here and we import files. So if a single track is selected, it'll ask you, all right, so let's reuse, let's see. So try just dragging them over. I know that there is kind of like a prompt you to, usually a dialogue that will allow you to do that, but just try dragging the files over and see if that helps Val. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted Val 1 gallon of Kahlua mocha ice cream. All right, wonderful to see the button man on. Thanks for joining us today. You see Jazz Dudes mentioning with the update today, a lot of the MIDI logical editor bugs have been resolved. All right, the button man has received 1 gallon of chocolate peppermint ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, so Beverly's probably with that beat says that probably case someone made it. It's not showing a preset name and the lo-fi template custom made. But if you just save the preset like I showed you earlier, you can recall that preset and use it in your own songs. And we see Beverly will add a cowbell. You customize it. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. Okay, sorry, just my chat field jumped. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios, says, Greg, every time I update/upgrade to Groove Agent 6 from Groove Agent 5, the installer replaces the older version. Is it problematic to have both Groove Agent 5 and 6 in the same folder? Say if I liked a certain feature that was missing. So I think you might be able to. I haven't tried, but generally I don't know if there's anything that was taken away in Groove Agent 5 from Groove Agent 6. But I think it just kind of makes it easier so that all of your projects are immediately loaded in the newer one that is resizable. So see, Val just making a funny comment that my son would appreciate. It's like, we got Groove Agent 6 before GTA 6. GA6 before GTA 6. I just see I would like to go back to Groove Agent 5 so I can finish renaming pads in my acoustic agent kits. So let me know. So let's say if we open up Groove Agent 6 here. Yeah, let me see if we could. It doesn't look like you could, or I know a way to quickly rename the pads here. So let's. Yeah, I'm not sure if you could have both installed or if it's kind of one. I could see if I could find out. If you want me to, you can send me a quick email or message over Facebook. All right, so we see from Val, just says, Greg, when I drag and drop, it used to ask me one track or multiple tracks, but it stopped doing that now. It only does one track per default. I remember this. I remember the dialog box many times. Let's see if I just do a brand new project with no tracks in it. All right, so I'm just going to drag it. All right, so we drag it there. It goes to one track. If I drag it to just to the track area, it seems to automatically do that. So maybe if you choose like to drag it to a single track, if you drag it to the timeline, it may put it on. Let's see if we have two audio tracks. Right, so say if I want these all on track 3, wherever the green is, it'll go. But if I drag these over to tracks, then it's automatically put onto different tracks. So maybe it was just kind of streamlined to be so you didn't have one extra. You could just change the behavior where it dragged to, as opposed to having to have a choice to always switch. So if you drag it to the track area, it puts on different tracks. Drag it like to the project window, it'll put it on the existing selected track, as you see with the green kind of icon. All right, so you see Beverly PD just mentioning when I closed Cubase, restarted it, populated exactly what Jazz Dude just said. The drum preset is Beatmaker's Delight. It showed up to the left upper corner of the drum machine with that name. All right. All right, so we see from Val just said, in the track area, but that's new, right? So I think the behavior's changed because I remember that, let's see if I have 14 still open, that it used to prompt you and then you always had to kind of choose. So now, like, I think it seems like it's actually doing it based on what you actually, if you drag it to the track area, it makes tracks. You drag it to a single track, then it places it there. So it's probably a little more sensible and practical. All right, Sable's received 1 gallon of chocolate cherry mash ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, we see Gareth has rejoined. All right, Daniel Pashman says, hey, Greg, Q-Link doesn't work on pan parameters for me. Does it work for you? Trying to reset all pans to center. Okay, so let me just add some additional tracks. Okay, so we'll come here to mixer. Let me adjust panning here. I'll make this a little taller so it's easier to see. Okay, so I'm going to select these particular tracks, and I'm just going to hold down Command or Control and click in the area. Okay, so let's say if I come here, I'm going to hold down Alt-Shift. All right, so switch this to absolute and hold down Alt-Shift, and then we could come right over here. And if, let's say, we activate Q-Link, sometimes it could be tricky with the Alt Control and then when you hit Control. So let's come back. So let's say I have this. I'm going to just activate Q-Link and put it into absolute, select the channels, and then hold down Control or Command and click on one of them. And let's see if that does it. So that will reset them all to center. So sometimes if you're holding down Alt Shift and then you hold down the Control modifier, but so again, if it's all like this, select the channels, enable Q-Link here in the mixer instead of holding it down with the keyboard shortcut, and then just put in absolute and then Control, and then you could again just kind of have multiple tracks. I think it could be kind of awkward sometimes with the Alt Control because you're holding Alt Shift to set. Let me just see. If I come here, so if I have this set and then hold down Control or Command, so try just to activate Q-Link in the mixer and then just where to select a track, click on one, and then they'll all shift to the same value. So I think it's hard for it to distinguish if you're holding down Control or Command Shift or Alt or Option Shift, because you have to kind of have two modifiers with the Shift key held down. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, we see Gareth has received 1 gallon of pumpkin spice ice cream. All right, so we see what's the name of the Cubase Facebook page? Greg just mentioned. Thanks. I don't remember, and it was probably just 5 minutes ago. Let me know what I was talking about. Maybe I could help you if you could just refresh my memory on that. All right, so we see from Elvis Tuna. I want to connect a Softube 1. Is there a preset option for connecting it directly? So I don't have a Softube 1. It could be that I'm not sure if there is a MIDI remote script for it. That would probably be the best thing, or if it probably, I think by default when it was released, it probably works as a remote device kind of under the legacy system. I'm sure that someone has made one that is a MIDI remote device that you could download. And when you go to the MIDI remote, if you just go to the settings here, and there's kind of, I think that they might have one, but I don't have a physical unit, then you could import the script here, and then it should kind of automatically show up for you. So it should be pretty easy to get configured. All right, Una Memento says the spring will be 37 years since I got my first Cubase. Time flies. So yeah, I'm 35 years myself. Still learning. All right, thanks for the clarification, John Barry, about the renaming acoustic agent pads. I'll pass it along. All right, so we see from Daniel Pashman, says, thanks, man, that worked. I think it was with the panning. All right, Gareth's wishing that, hope that everyone has learned a ton today. All right, got a couple more minutes left. Yeah, I think next week we'll be crossing 2,000 hours of live stream since COVID. All right. All right, so we see Vince as 5E just says, wow, it took me all day, but I think I have my plugins responding now, so that's great. All right, so we see Elvis Fortuna just says, thank you so much. So Terry Gray says, wow, that's a lot of hours helping us. Thanks, Greg. It's kept me employed too, so that's good. All right, so let's see if we have any more questions coming in. I know we have a minute or two left. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions and hope that everyone has learned some new tips or tricks. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to the channel. Tim Cage is saying, holy moly, 2,000 hour milestone upcoming. Virtual sainthood for Greg. I'm just happy to be able to do it, and that Steinberg and Yamaha allow me to have done it all this time, and for being, I love being part of the community as well. All right, we'll see if there's any other quick questions that pop in. If not, we'll be back on Tuesday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Michael Graybill says, so happy to see the quick hotfix today. Thanks for the great hangout. So yeah, I mean, it's always, the team at Steinberg, I mean, it's a big project to do anything, but, they take a lot of pride in their work. And I think that really kind of shows in being able to resolve issues that come up quickly. So. All right. Well, I think we are just about out of time. Thanks again to everyone for all the great questions. We'll be back on Tuesday and look forward to, so we got 100 likes today, so it's great. So we look forward to seeing everyone back next week. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone stay safe and healthy. Have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you back on Tuesday. Goodbye.